not necessarily the most fearful of death, but I do think that when you leave people behind that have fought so hard to keep you alive, I think that would be devastating.
When all my hopes seemed gone, your love was always there. I opened up in darkness.
Hi, I'm Mallory-Smith, and I have cystic fibrosis.
She would write in it all the time. I wanted to read it, and she would not allow me.
Every single decision that I make has a life or death significance to it. And that's something that I don't want to convey, because I don't want people looking at me and pitying me or being scared that I'm gonna drop dead or anything like that.
She, took out her opinions and her feelings on her journal clearly, and then tried to just live a happy life.
Things seem to be getting worse instead of better. Seems like I'm resistant to the antibiotics. My boyfriend just left town, and I miss him. That's all. I feel like people with CF are privy to secrets it takes most other people a lifetime to understand. How lucky we are to be alive. That we can leave behind a legacy when we go that will impact others. That simple things are often the most beautiful. That love and happiness are the most important things to strive for.
Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Quality of Life show with Nancy and Lisa. The crazy mother-daughter travel team and publishers of Big Blend magazines, including the new upcoming Quality of Life magazine. And today we're really excited to talk about a documentary that's called Salt in My Soul. It's a feature documentary by Will Battersby, and he's here. And it's based on the bestselling posthumously published memoir of the same name. And this is all about Mallory-Smith, who really worked about living her best life while living with cystic fibrosis. And we're really, really honored to have her mother, Diane, here on the show with us. And I encourage everyone, you can get on video on demand right now, starting January 21st in the US and Canada, and starting in, I think, January 25th around the world. So anyway, no, actually, it's the 25th for everybody. So just watch out for it and get it there. So welcome, Will, how are you?
Very well, thank you for having us.
Thank you, and welcome, Diane. It's really a pleasure to have you here, both of you here.
Yes.
Thank you. Both of you putting this together, this has got to have been difficult. And for you, Diane, going through Mallory's, she kept these secret, like doing audio recordings, her incredible writing. Her writing is just what
amazing.
You showed in the documentary. We haven't had a chance to read her memoir yet, but her writing's incredible. But that had to have been like really hard and good at the same time.
Yes, it's exactly right. It was emotionally compelling. It was my grief therapy because it was 2,500 pages. It took me 4 months to really get through it. But it also gave me a path forward. So that's the best gift of all.
And cystic fibrosis, I wanted to touch on this because I think one of the very beginning of the documentary made us like really wake up to what is cystic fibrosis. You hear it about it and you're like, oh, someone, it's like an invisible illness. And, when you look at Mallory as she was growing up and her spirit, she just such a beautiful young woman.
She just looks so healthy.
Like a bill of health. So you would never know meeting her if you didn't know the backstory that she was, dealing with this life-threatening illness, cystic fibrosis. So can you give us kind of an overview what the disease is so we can have some better understanding?
Yes, and I also want to say it's the reason I picked that photo to be on the cover of the book with her standing on her head. That was shot 1 year before she died on our last trip to Hawaii. And she looks like the picture of health. And a day later, she was in the hospital on the fast trajectory down.
Wow.
So it speaks to invisible illness, and it's something that's very important to me personally. So about cystic fibrosis, it's a disease you're born with. You have to get one gene from your mother and one gene from your father. And it affects every organ in the body that has mucus, is sort of the easiest way. So your sinuses, your pancreas, your lungs. Most people have the most severe involvement with their lungs, and they ultimately die of lung disease, but there are a subset of patients who struggle much more with their GI. And one of Mallory's famous lines was, everybody thinks that the lungs are what's going to kill me. So that's why all the doctors talk about is my lung health, but it's the GI problems that ruined my life. And she felt very strongly that even though one was going to kill her, the other was responsible for ruining her life, because the thick, sticky mucus makes absorption difficult and digestion difficult, and it causes all kinds of GI problems. So in addition to lung involvement, which is what most people know it for, it wreaks havoc on all the systems. Many of the CF patients, I just heard from a girl at UPMC who's having full sinus reconstruction because the mucus has so destroyed the membranes in her sinuses.
Wow. My dad had pulmonary fibrosis, and he died from that. So I was looking up the difference between the two, and his was not hereditary. His is something that you can't even say he caught it, like he didn't catch it. He got it from working in a butchery where he was breathing ammonia hydroxide.
Oh yeah.
And it scarred his lungs. And then working in a ceramics factory where he was breathing fine dust particles in the air all the time from clay. And between those two scenarios, that's how he got that. And he really, I understand your story, because the diagnosis was, it's up, it's down, it's here, it's there. There's so many days, so many years, so many months, and none of it was right ever with what actually happened. But this is several years ago. So I'm hoping that the medical profession is moving forward on some
because it's science, you're studying. It's always changing. Just even right now with what we're dealing with COVID, it's like, we have a new strain. Do we do the vaccine? Do we not? And now I don't even know what to believe, but it seems to me that science is always progressing. Medicine is always progressing. But then something that I learned from Mallory is she listened to her body and understanding the ocean and diving in, how that really got her to understand I think it was calming for her too, because you have to be you're zoned out in it, and beautiful, right? And at the same time,
it's amazing she could
taught about salt, right? And how that helps. And so there's things a patient knows sometimes that I think is so important. I think that's really one of the crucial things is her story about listen and how she compared cystic fibrosis to the environment. I thought that was incredible. And she really understood science. I know she went to college and everything, but she knew science. And I think that also comes from being in a hospital so much.
Yes, you do end up owning your disease and taking responsibility for it, because if you don't, nobody else will.
So that was fascinating to me. Then also, your husband Mark going out and doing so much research. So you wrote a book, a children's book, 65 Roses, to teach about cystic fibrosis. So there's writers, there's science. You guys as a family, you're all brains. It's amazing and talented and creative. So it's really cool to see that part come through in the documentary. And Will, what you showed and how you pieced it together, I think
that's really
you've done such an amazing job to show such a human side of what it's like to go through something and you showed the ups, the positive too. Otherwise, I think we'd all be crying from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of Mallory's story, right? And I knew it as soon as I read the book that I wanted to make this into a documentary film. And I think why I wanted to do that was because in a way it's such a simple story, right? It's about it's a coming of age, it's a classic coming of age story, right? About a beautiful girl growing up, right? But the twist is that she's having to face dying early while growing up. So, there's so much life kind of in this compressed period of time. And I think what was beautiful about, all the members of the family, but, the way Mallory responded to that, as you say, rather than turning inward, and obviously she had mental health issues, and and I think that the writing was so much about her way of dealing with that, but that she also, in her most depressed moment, turned outward, turned towards the environment, turned towards learning, turned towards other people, and so I think the story, it of course has its sad elements, but it's ultimately quite life affirming, in an ironic way, and I think that's the beauty of it.
And when you're on all those medications, that there are side effects to combining more than one medicine together. And I know from what happened with my dad that when he finally passed and the head doctor looked at all the charts, he himself was astounded how many doctors have prescribed how many different medications and what those medications altogether produced, because he didn't seem to know what the other doctors were doing on a daily basis. So my dad had tons of drugs that he was on, and mentally it was really difficult. And those combination of drugs, it's not like they gave you one pill, he was taking 19 to 25 pills a day. And I don't know that the drug companies ever really did experiments to see if I put this drug with this drug or 20 other drugs, what would be the effect.
That was way back when.
In Mallory's case, and with cystic fibrosis, the kids used to die when they were 5 years old. And it is all those combination of medications that have extended the life. It was, 20 and then 25 and then 30. And these medications, while they do come with side effects, they actually are extending lives. I don't know in the case with pulmonary fibrosis about the medications or what that does, but with CF, modern medicine, Western medicine has changed the trajectory.
That's amazing. It's amazing. It's not a fun thing to go through all the treatments that she had to do, and not a fun thing at all. It's painful, but she, your life is extended. So, and something for her to grapple with at such a young age.
It's amazing.
That is just incredible. And as a family, I love how you all came together, and her friends, she talks about having friends, not maybe having the village, but it's a small village, but it's damn strong, And then I thought that was incredible. But your husband is, doing the research, found, is it help me, Will, is it phage?
Phage. Phage. Phage.
Okay, it's my new word of the day. But phage turns out to be pretty darn cool. Tell us what the phage is, because this would have really helped had it not been so late in the game for Mallory.
Do you want me to take it? So
yeah.
So Mark, who is brilliant, he's a lawyer by trade, but a brilliant mind. That's Mallory's dad. I did what I think we would all do as dads, right? And he just essentially spent his life and Mallory's life looking for a cure, looking for a way to stop this, right? He came across there's an epidemiologist, a scientist at UC San Diego called Stephanie Strathty, whose husband and she and her husband had gone on vacation to Egypt, and he'd caught a superbug, right? And everyone's heard about a superbug. A superbug is essentially, a germ that becomes resistant to antibiotics. Stephanie had actually saved her husband's life from the superbug using phage therapy. And Mark, Mallory's dad, read about that case. This is right after Mallory had a lung transplant. And unfortunately, her superbug, she had the superbug called B. cepacia, and it had reinfected her new lungs. And Mark reached out to Stephanie, and phages are naturally occurring. There are millions of them in the world, billions, and they're one of the oldest organisms in existence. So we've evolved in conjunction with them. So, you have millions in your body right now, and they're doing all sorts of good things.
Hello, phages.
It's a good thing. Yeah, you want to look
I
after
want to talk
phages.
to them.
Yes, exactly. Essentially, there is a phage out there that will attack and kill a super bacteria, right? So the US Navy, Stephanie Strathy, and I forget who else, Diane will insert.
People in Canada.
Adaptive Phage Therapeutics.
And APT, they very quickly identified the phage that would potentially attack Mallory's superbug. It was flown in, this amazing team effort. And again, credit to the Western doctors at UPMC. Would have been very easy for them to be suspicious of this, right? It's a new treatment coming out of the blue, but they agreed to have this administered to Mallory, and unfortunately, as you say, it was too late for her. But this is again a very amazing thing that the Smith family, Mark and Diane, agreed to. That in an autopsy they discovered that the phages had actually started to work. And had Mallory received them earlier, the outcome might have been very different. And now there has been an explosion since Mallory's case in phage research. And we just heard from a doctor at Yale at the end of last week that, and it's not just cystic fibrosis, right? These are things that can attack any, a staph infection, any antibiotic resistant infection. There's a phage that was actually named after Mallory, very movingly.
Nice.
Nothing to do with CF, that has saved 5 limbs in the last year, saved 5 people from having a limb amputated because they found the phage that knocked out the staph infection that nothing had been able to deal with. So it literally is, it sounds, silly, but Mallory's case and what Mark did is going to change the world, and it will change medicine.
That's
at the end of the
amazing.
documentary, you were saying in the scrolling, the credits at the end, that this had actually helps in COVID-19 as well for some patients.
Yeah, so it's it was used in those cases on underlying infection, so it wasn't to treat the COVID.
Okay.
So what happens is, you tend, if you're in a situation where your immune system is really knocked out, like you're a cystic fibrosis patient, you have a lot of mucus, you can't flush out infections, or if you're very sick, that's when these superbugs can really take root. Or if you're hospitalized, obviously for a long time, we've heard that. This was used on, not to treat the COVID, but to treat other infections that these patients had received.
And that's the whole thing. It's not going to, that's the whole part of it. So it's getting rid of the superbugs. Diane, with her book being out and the documentary, thank you for having that all happen. As a family, we've got to say thank you, because it really is enlightening on the human spirit level. It's enlightening because we do take things for granted in the world. We do. As human society, we're very good at that. And it just really kind of puts us back to earth a little, and also inspires us what medicine can do. So with all of this, I heard that you're doing work with fundraisers. What should we know? How can we all help?
So between the book, the talks I give, the documentary, the children's book, and now these press interviews, what we're trying to do is raise awareness for antimicrobial resistance, which is AMR. That's the category of resistant bacteria that leads to what we call superbugs. We're raising money through Mallory's Legacy Fund. And the beauty of that fund is we don't touch the money. It goes through the California Community Foundation, and 100% of it can go directly to research. So we have been able to, and we're donating 100% of profits from the book and the film, because we don't want to profit from telling Mallory's story. But we've already raised in Mallory's lifetime, and since she passed away, a combined total of over $5.5 million.
Wow.
And it's all gone to research, and we've been able to move the needle a lot. Now we're really specifically focusing on AMR and phage therapy. And to give you a little more information on what Will was sharing about COVID and the superbug situation, what happens is patients went into the hospital for COVID, and then they got put on ventilators and they developed secondary bacterial infections. And what happens with those hospital acquired bacteria is people go in to have appendicitis, or, they have appendicitis, they need an appendectomy, or they have a heart attack, or they're in because they need a cancer treatment. And these bacteria, which just live in the hospitals, become resistant because of the repeated use of antibiotics, and every single antibiotic will eventually become resistant. It's just the nature of the way it works. And there's a lot of learning that's still going on. So for example, we first thought phage therapy was just going to be just solve the problem, because these living organisms would be able to, they're called bacteria eating phages because they eat bacteria. But what we know now is that it's a kind of a combination of cycling, and they do need to do a lot of trials. They need to cycle the antibiotics with the phage therapy. And the reason we need to raise money is because these trials take money, big money, millions and millions of dollars. And so we're putting pressure on the NIH and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and the governing bodies to fund them. But what we've learned from the doctors we're working with is that the government won't fund these compassionate use cases, which is how Mallory got it. And you need those compassionate use cases in order to drive the information when you're creating a trial. So for example, you learn something from every case that's anecdotal, but the FDA will never approve an anecdotal treatment. They want to put it through rigorous trials to make sure that nobody gets hurt. The interesting thing about the CF population, unlike somebody like Stephanie's husband, who, a normal person goes into the hospital, gets a resistant bacteria, you're not going to try some experimental treatment on them because you're going to be afraid they're going to die. So what happens is they wait until you get to the place where Mallory was, where it was too late, or the case where Stephanie Strathy's husband was, where he was going to die without it. And then they'll try the experimental drug. In her case, he did not have underlying health conditions. He got it in time to save him. And from that, and then from studying Mallory's case and realizing that the cystic fibrosis population is a constant breeding ground for these young adults who over time, their lungs have broken down from repeated infections. And so they're at death's door and they have no other choice. And Mark's vision, and why he introduced the idea of phage therapy to the cystic fibrosis, was to treat these kids before their lungs got so bad that they would need a lung transplant, because lung transplants are fraught with problems and create other problems. You're on immunosuppressants for the rest of your life. So if you're not going to die from the initial infection, you could potentially get something else. So it's really, really important that we do this work. And the film is a simple coming of age story. And Will's done a beautiful job of telling a story of a young girl that's hopeful and inspiring, but also points the finger and the camera right at this issue that we all need to be paying attention to.
I think it's well done. And I know. Go ahead, Nancy.
I was just going to say that, I grew up in hospitals because of my dad. And, there's a question on my mind of how much the patient's rights versus the doctor's sometimes gets in the way. Like sometimes the patient really wants something done a different way and the doctors are no. And you wonder who has the actual right to their own body to say, this is what I need and this is what I need now. And then the doctors say yes or no. And if they say no, then you don't get it. What legally is there space there for something to happen to make it so that patients can be heard?
Well, that's the reason you tell stories. That's the reason you tell stories like this one. I mean, from my perspective, we want Mallory's story to remind people of the power of the patient voice. And I give a lot of talks about that. And I think that you reach people in different ways. Some you'll reach through the book, some will reach through the film, some we reach through my speaking, some will reach through the press. But there is this interesting thing that's happening in medicine at a time when doctors are under pressure to bill more. They have to feed the electronic medical record. So you come into a doctor's office and the patient's over there and this is the computer and the doctor is asking questions and they're not even looking at the patient and they're just saying, this happened, did that happen? And there's this, so it's hard to create space for the patient voice in the current system that we have. And I think everybody thinks the system is broken. Then you layer on COVID and masks and telehealth, and it's very, very difficult. But our hope is that, and this is one of the 3 primary objectives of the film, is to remind people that we have to hear more from the patient and that the patient voice has to be part of patient-centered care.
Yeah, and I think that's where family and friends really help, because sometimes the patient is not feeling well enough to have that voice, or to remember everything. It's especially depending on age. So thank you both. I wish we had more time, but thank you both for joining us and for letting everybody know about the issues and what they can do to support. So everyone, the website is saltinmysouldoc.com. You can also go saltinmysoulbook.com. Follow on Facebook, same thing, Salt in My Soul Doc on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and go giant.pictures. We got to give them a shout out. www.giant.pictures. That's the website for the film company. So thank you guys. And of course, keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Salt and My Soul is out January 21st in theaters in Los Angeles and New York. And then it'll be available for download in the US, Canada, UK, and Ireland, and specific areas around the world starting January 25th. So again, saltinmysoul.com. All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.